I have given this testimony 4 times now. To the Concord Review Board, to the Skin Armistice envoys who did not believe me, to my own clutch mother who wept, and once to a recorder in an empty room just so the words would exist somewhere if I did not. I will give it a 5th time properly for whoever finds this. My name is Veth. I was sub-coordinator of signals aboard Deepwatch Tessar, and before the thing I am going to tell you about, I believed I understood the universe. I believed that every living creature, no matter how strange its body or its tongue, wanted the same simple thing at the bottom of itself: to keep breathing, to see the next cycle, to not die. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about it in a way that still wakes me in the dark. Because I met the humans. And the humans, I promise you, do not want what the rest of us want. Or if they do, they want it so much less than they want other things, stupid things, beautiful things, impossible things, that you cannot use their survival against them. You cannot bargain with a species that does not flinch from its own ending. You cannot frighten them into being reasonable. We thought that made them weak. A creature that does not protect itself, we reasoned, is a creature that will not last. We had it exactly backwards. Let me start at the beginning. Let me tell you about the station and the quiet, and the day the quiet ended. Deepwatch Tessar was not an important place. That is the first thing you have to understand. We were a listening post, nothing more. A gray ring of metal turning slowly at the edge of the Tessar fold, where 2 empty arms of the galaxy almost touch and the stars thin out to nothing. There was no world below us. There was no fleet beside us. There was just us and the dark and the great cold ears of the station straining for sounds that almost never came. A relay, a way station, a place where ships paused to drink power and trade air before they pushed on into the deep. The kind of post you are assigned to when the Conquered wants you somewhere harmless. I had asked for it, actually. After my mate died in the Halio collapse, I wanted somewhere with no weather and no surprises, and Tessar gave me both. 3 years I turned with that ring. 3 quiet years. We were a mixed crew. That was normal out at the edge. There were 40 of us in all. 11 Kassarai like me. 9 of the Othran, those tall, pale folk who speak by changing color at the throat. A scattering of dull engineers who kept to their own deck and their own gods. 2 skin liaisons, which seems a bitter joke now, given what came after. But in those days the skin were a conquered people too, sour and proud and entirely correct in everything they did, and nobody thought of them as anything but allies. And there were 6 humans. 6 out of 40. I want you to hold that number because it matters later. 6 humans on a station that did not matter, at the edge of space that did not matter, doing work that did not matter. They ran our reactor and our water reclamation and our hull skin repair. They were maintenance. The lowest, dirtiest, least glamorous work on the ring, and the Conquered had handed it to the newest member species because that is what you do with the newcomers. You give them the pipes. The humans did not seem to mind. That was the first thing I noticed about them in the years before any of this. They did not seem to mind much of anything. Their chief was a male named Hollis Cobb. I can still see him exactly. He was not young. For a human, that means his hair had gone the color of cold ash, and the skin around his eyes had folded into deep, soft creases, and he moved with a slowness that I mistook at first for weakness. He was broad through the shoulders and thick through the middle, and he smelled always of machine grease and the bitter brown liquid the humans brewed and drank by the liter. He had a scar that ran from his jaw down into his collar, pale and old, and when I once asked him about it, Kassarai or blunt, we ask things, he said a door fell on him. A door fell on you, I said. A big door, he said, and that was all. I learned later that this was a lie. I learned later about a great many things Hollis Cobb chose not to say. The other 5 were younger. There was Ray's, a small, quick female who fixed the things Cobb pointed at and never stopped moving her hands. There was Tavar, who was enormous and silent and gentle, and who could lift a coupling that took 3 dull to shift. There was the medic, a sharp-tongued person they called Doc, whose given name I never once heard anyone use. There was a young one, barely grown, named Pim, who laughed too loud and too often and was frightened of the dark vacuum outside in a way the others teased him for. And there was Salvo, the comms tech who shared half my work and most of my shifts, and who is the reason I am alive, and whom I will tell you about when I have the strength. 6 humans, and for 3 years they were simply the people who fixed the pipes. I drank with them, in the loose way you drink with crewmates you do not choose. I learned their game with the marked tiles, which I was bad at. I learned that they would do almost anything for each other and almost nothing for a rule. I learned that they laughed at things that should not be funny, at danger, at pain, at death itself, and I thought in my reasonable Cassara way that this was a kind of damage, a flaw in the species. A loose wire. I did not understand yet that the loose wire was the whole point. The day it happened started like every other day. I remember it was Salvo's turn to bring the brown drink to the signals deck, and he brought it in the dented metal flask he was not supposed to use, and he poured me a measure even though my people cannot really process the stuff, because that was the joke between us. He poured, I sniffed it and made a face, he drank both. We had run that joke 1,000 times. It was a small thing. It is strange which small things you keep. The fold sensors were quiet. They were always quiet. I had a tray of routine traffic to log, a dull freighter 4 days out, a Concord supply skiff overdue but not alarmingly so, and I was logging it half asleep when the long-range array stuttered. Just stuttered. A skip in the signal, the kind of thing a micrometeor or a power flutter can cause. I almost did not look up. But Salvo looked up. I have thought about this many times, why he looked and I did not. We had the same training. We watched the same screen. But there was something in the humans, I came to believe, that was always half listening for the wrong thing to happen, as if part of them never fully trusted the quiet, as if some old animal under the skin was always waiting for the predator. That's not a flutter, Salvo said. It's a flutter, I said. Drink your drink. He did not drink his drink. He leaned into the array and he pulled the raw return, the unprocessed echo before the system cleans it, and he ran it slow. And I watched his face change. I did not know human faces well even then, but I knew that one. I had seen it on him exactly once before, when Pim had nearly been caught outside in a hull breach and lived only by luck. It was the face a human makes when the animal under the skin has been proven right. Veth, he said very quietly, get the coordinator. What is it? Get the coordinator, now please. He never said please. I got the coordinator. What Salvo had heard, in the dirty, unprocessed echo that the clean system was about to throw away as noise, was a fold shadow. A ship, many ships, moving under their own fold bubbles, which is a thing you do only when you do not want to be seen. The clean processor had categorized the return as gravitational static and was, in its tidy way, in the very act of deleting it. If Salvo had not looked up, we would have had no warning at all. None. We would have learned of the skin the way you learn of a knife already in your back. Because they were skin. That is the part the armistice envoys could not forgive me for saying, but it is true, and I watched it happen. The 2 skin liaisons we had aboard, the sour proud allies who ate at our table, when the fold shadows resolved into 30 skin assault craft running silent on our position, those 2 locked themselves on our command deck and put a slug through the coordinator's skull and tried to take the station's array intact. I do not fully understand the politics even now. There were words afterward about a schism in the skin ascendancy, a faction that decided the conquered was soft and ripe, and that the war could be started here, quietly, at a station that did not matter, by capturing our listening array and turning our own ears against us. I do not care about the politics. I care that I was on the signals deck when the killing started, and that the alarms went from green to the deep poolsing red that none of us had ever seen outside of a drill, and that the station-wide channel filled with screaming, and that I, Sub-Coordinator Veth, who had asked for a posting with no surprises, sat frozen in my seat, and could not make my limbs move. Salvo moved. He grabbed me by the shoulder ridge humans grab. It is a very human thing. They reach for you with those five-fingered hands as if to drag you bodily out of death. And he hauled me out of the chair and he said, "Down. Down, get under, go." And he shoved me beneath the signals console and put his own body between me and the door. I want to be precise about this, because it is where my understanding of his species first cracked open. A slug came through the door. It took Salvo high in the shoulder and spun him into the console, and he made a sound I will not describe. And the thing he did then, bleeding with a hole in him, was not what any reasonable creature does. He did not curl around the wound. He did not freeze as I had frozen. He laughed. A short, ugly, breathless laugh, and he said, "Okay, okay. That's how it is." And he reached up with his good arm and he tore the emergency cutting tool off the console wall, the heavy one, for hull work, and he waited beside the door, holding it, for the skin that was coming through. The skin came through. I am not going to tell you it was a clean thing or a noble thing. It was wet and fast and horrible, and it was over in the space of 3 breaths. And when it was done, there was a dead skin on our signals deck, and Salvo was on his knees with his back against the wall, gray in the face, holding his ruined shoulder and grinning at me with red on his teeth. "You good?" he asked me. "Veth, hey, you good?" I was good. I was untouched. He had a slug in him and he asked me if I was good. "You're shot," I said. It was all I could find to say. "Yeah," he looked at it like it belonged to somebody else. "Yeah, that's gonna be a thing." And then he laughed again, that same ugly, breathless laugh, and he said, "Door fell on me," which was Cobb's old joke, and I understood for the first time that the humans had a whole language hidden inside their language, made out of laughing at the worst things, and that it was not damage. It was armor. We were cut off within the hour. I should explain the shape of what we were inside, so you understand how complete the trap was. Deepwatch Tessar was a ring, and the ring was divided into 4 arcs, sealed from each other by heavy bulkheads that drop in an emergency. The skin had hit us at the command arc, where the array and the controls and the senior officers were, and they had taken it. They had the brain of the station. What they did not have because of the bulkheads was the body. We were in the body, the maintenance arc and the lower habitation ring. By the time the bulkheads finished dropping and the smoke cleared and we counted ourselves, there were 19 of us left alive and sealed in the lower third of a dying station, with 30 skin craft on the hull and a boarding force already inside, and no way out, and no way to call for help, because they had the array. 19 of us. I will give you the count, because I came to know it the way you know your own pulse. 5 Cassare, myself included. 4 Othran, their throats flickering gray with terror. 3 Dull, who had sealed their engineering deck and would not at first come out. And the humans. 5 humans. We had lost one in the first minutes, a young one, not Pim, a quiet boy I had barely known, and there were 5 left. Cobb, Reyes, Tavar, Doc, Pim. And Salvo made it 6, but Salvo had a slug in his shoulder, and Doc had her hands inside him within minutes of us regrouping, swearing at him steadily in a low, flat voice while she worked, and Salvo swore back, and the 2 of them carried on a furious whispered argument the entire time she was saving his life, and I did not understand a word of it, but I understood that this, too, was the armor. They were holding each other up with insults. We gathered in the maintenance bay. It was the largest space we had, full of half-stripped machinery and the smell of coolant, lit in the ugly red of the alarm. And we did the thing that all reasonable people do when death is at the door. We started to count the cost. The senior surviving officer was an Othran named Threll of the Quiet Tide, a careful, decent person, the kind of person you want in charge when there is time to think. She stood on a coupling crate so we could all see her throat, and she changed color through the formal grays of command, and she laid it out for us the way the Conquered trains all of us to lay it out. She told us the truth. I respected her for it. She told us that 19 lightly armed crew could not retake a command arc held by a skin boarding force. She told us that the array was lost and there would be no signal for help. She told us that a Concord patrol passed within fold range of Tessar every 11 days, and that the last one had passed 6 days ago, which meant rescue, if it came at all, if anyone even noticed our silence in time, was 5 days away. 5 days. And then she told us the calculation, because she was honest, and because she was Othran, and the Othran do not lie to soften things. The skin did not need 5 days. The skin needed the station intact and the array working, and to get the array working they needed to clear us out of the lower ring, because we could still, from down here, reach the conduits that fed the array its power. As long as we held the conduits, the array was dead, and a dead array was no use to them. So the skin would come down into the lower ring to clear us. Soon. And when they did, 19 of us with hand tools and 4 old slug throwers between us could not hold. The reasonable course, Threll said, and her throat went the careful gray of a person saying a hard thing, is to negotiate our surrender in exchange for our lives. The skin want the station, not the crew. If we cede the conduits, they have no further need to kill us. We will be prisoners, but we will be alive. And alive, we can be recovered or exchanged or freed when the war is decided elsewhere. It was a good speech. It was a true speech. Every Kassarai in that bay made the gesture of agreement, the small dip of the head ridge. Every Othran throat steadied toward the gray of consent. The dull, when it was relayed to them, signaled their agreement from behind their sealed door. It was the sane thing. It was the survivable thing. We would live. And in the middle of all those nodding, agreeing, surviving heads, Holly's Cobb laughed. It was not a loud laugh. It was worse than loud. It was a low, tired, private laugh, the kind of laugh you give when someone has said something so foolish you do not even have the energy to argue with it. And every head in that bay turned to look at the dirty old human sitting on an overturned crate with his elbows on his knees. Threll's throat flickered, confused. "Chief Cobb, do you object?" "You want to surrender to the skin," Cobb said. He did not stand. He did not raise his voice. He looked at the floor while he spoke, and he spoke slowly, the way he always spoke. "You want to hand over the people in this room to the same folks who shot a hole in my comms tech and put a slug through your coordinator's head before lunch. And you figure they'll just, what, keep us, feed us, be nice about it. The skin observe the conventions of." "The skin," Cobb said, "broke every convention there is when they ran silent on a Concord post and murdered the watch. You're talking about the conventions like they still exist. They don't. They ended this morning." He finally looked up. His eyes in the red light were very steady. "You surrender to people who have already shown you who they are. The only thing you find out is how they like to do it, slow or fast." The bay was very quiet. "You don't know that," said one of the Kassarai. It was Wren, a young coordinator, his voice high and frightened. "You don't know they'll kill us. Surrender gives us a chance. Fighting gives us nothing. Fighting is it's just dying sooner. It's insane." And Cobb smiled at him. I remember the smile. It was almost kind. "Yeah," he said, "it probably is. I want to stop here and tell you what I thought, in that moment. Because it is important that you understand I was on the side of the reasonable. I thought Cobb was going to get us all killed. I thought he was exactly the loose wire I had always suspected the humans of being. That under the grease and the brown drink and the gallows jokes, there was a creature that simply did not weigh its own life correctly, that could not do the arithmetic that every other species in the Concord did without effort. Survive. The first law of everything that lives. Survive and you can rebuild, recover, return. A live prisoner is worth infinitely more than a dead hero. This is not Kassarai wisdom or Othran wisdom. This is the wisdom of the cell, the wisdom written into every living thing in the galaxy at the level below thought. Except apparently the humans. I looked at the 5 of them, ranged loose around the edge of the bay, and I saw that not one of them had nodded with the rest of us. Reyes had her arms crossed and her jaw set. Tavar, the huge silent one, was already turning a length of conduit pipe over in his hands, testing its weight, as if the decision had been made the moment the first slug flew. Doc had not even looked up from Salvo's shoulder. Pym, the frightened young one, the one who was scared of the dark outside, even Pym was looking at Cobb with an expression I can only call hope, as if Cobb refusing to surrender was the best news he had heard all day. They were not afraid of the wrong thing. That is what I finally understood, watching them. The rest of us were afraid of dying. The humans were afraid of something else, something I did not have a word for, and dying was a price they were apparently willing to pay to avoid it. "Chief," Threll said, and her throat was the strained pale gray of an officer trying to hold authority that is slipping. "I am the senior surviving officer. The decision to surrender is mine to make." "Sure," Cobb said. "Make it, surrender yourself. Surrender anybody who wants to go with you. I'm not gonna stop you and I'm not gonna judge you because I've got no right." He stood up finally, slowly, his old knees cracking. "But me and mine are gonna go hold the conduit junction. Because the second that array comes back online, the skin don't just own this station. They turn our ears on the whole sector. They'll know where every conquered patrol in 100 light years is sitting. They'll start this war with a free first move, and a couple million people on the other end who never saw it coming." He looked around the bay at all of us, the reasonable surviving 19. "You want to surrender to save 19 lives," he said. "I get it, I do. But there's a number on the other side of that array, and it's a lot bigger than 19, and I can't make it small enough in my head to walk away from. So," he shrugged, and the shrug was the most human thing I ever saw, a small tired lifting of those heavy shoulders. "We're gonna go be insane for a while. Anybody's welcome." And he picked up a cutting tool, and he walked toward the conduit junction, and the other 4 humans fell in behind him without a word. And the wounded one, Salvo, with a slug just dug out of his shoulder and his arm strapped across his chest, got up off the medical pallet and went too, and Doc swore at him and went with him to keep him from dying of it, which meant all 6 of them were going, all 6, to hold a junction against 30 ships worth of boarders. For a number they could not make small enough. I sat with the reasonable people, and I watched them go. And then I did a thing I have never been fully able to explain to the review board, or the envoys, or my clutch mother, or even to myself. I got up and I went with them. I will tell you why, as best I can, because I have had a long time to think about it. It was not bravery. I want to be honest. I am not a brave person and I have never pretended to be. I asked for the posting with no surprises, remember. I am the person who froze under the console while a human bled to put himself between me and the door. It was Salvo. It was watching Salvo get up off that pallet. A male with a hole freshly closed in his shoulder, gray-faced, swaying, who had every reason in the universe to lie down and let the others go, and he got up, because the others were going, because that was simply what you did, because the thing the humans were afraid of was worse to them than the wound. And I thought, he put his body between me and a slug this morning and asked if I was good. And if I sit here with the reasonable people and let him go and die at that junction, then I will be alive, and I will be a prisoner, and someday maybe I will be free. And every single day of that freedom I will know exactly what I am. So I followed the loose wire into the dark. The Cassare do not have a god, not really, but we have a thing we say to the dead, a small formal phrase that means roughly nothing remains undone between us. I said it under my breath as I crossed the bay. I said it to my mate, who died in the Halio collapse while I was somewhere safe. I said it to the version of myself that I was leaving on the safe side of the room. And then I caught up to Salvo, and I got under his good arm to take some of his weight, and he looked down at me with that bloody surprised human grin and he said, "Veth, the hell are you doing here?" "Being insane," I said, "apparently." And Holly's Cobb, walking ahead of us with his cutting tool over his shoulder like a farmer carrying a tool to a field, heard that and he laughed. But it was a different laugh this time, a real one warm and rough, and he said, without turning around, "Welcome to the species, sub-coordinator. We'll make a crazy person out of you yet." The conduit junction was a bad place to make a stand, and Cobb knew it was a bad place and chose it anyway. And when I asked him why, he explained it to me in a way that rearranged something in my mind. The junction was a wide low chamber where all 4 power conduits from the lower ring came together before they fed up into the command arc in the array. It had one main entrance, a broad pressure door, and 2 narrow maintenance crawlways that a skin could only come through one at a time, bent double. It had no second exit. If you went in there to fight, you could not retreat. There was nowhere to retreat to. The chamber was a dead end. "That's why," Cobb said when I pointed this out. He was wedging the pressure door half shut with a coupling jack, leaving a gap just wide enough to fight in. "No back door means nobody's getting behind us. Means nobody's gotta watch their back so everybody can watch the front. And it means," he grunted, driving the jack home, "it means none of mine is gonna get any clever ideas about a fighting retreat. There's no retreat. You're either holding this door or you're not. Keeps it simple. It keeps it simple because you have removed the option of surviving," I said. He looked at me. In the red light with the grease and the gray hair and the old scar, he looked very tired and very calm. "No," he said, "it keeps it simple because I've removed the option of running. Surviving's still on the table. Surviving means holding the door till help comes. 5 days." He went back to work. "Long odds, but it's not 0. I don't do 0. I'm not crazy." And I remember thinking, with something close to hysterical laughter rising in my own throat, "You are the most crazy person I have ever met, Hollis Cobb, and you have just told me you don't do 0, and I think you actually believe it." They came in the 3rd hour. We heard them before we saw them. The skin moved with a dry clicking sound, their hard limbs against the metal of the deck, and it built up out of the dark of the corridor beyond the half-shut door like rain coming, like the first dry rattle of rain on a hull. And the humans, who had been talking in low voices, sharing out the last of the brown drink from Salvo's dented flask, passing it hand to hand even to me who cannot drink it, the humans went quiet. And then Cobb said a thing I did not understand, and the others answered it, and I have since learned it was a very old human thing, a thing soldiers of their kind have apparently said to each other across more wars than my whole species has fought. He said, "All right, look alive." Look alive, as if the danger were a reason to be more alive, not less, as if the nearness of death were a thing that woke them up rather than a thing that closed them down. I have thought about those 2 words for a long time. In my language, in the language of every reasonable species I know, you tell each other to be careful. You tell each other to stay safe. You shrink in the face of death. You make yourself small and quiet and survivable. The humans told each other the opposite. They told each other to grow, to brighten, to be more. Look alive. And then the clicking became a flood, and the skin hit the door, and the 3rd hour ended, and everything I thought I knew about strength ended with it. I am going to stop here, on the edge of it, because what comes next I have to tell carefully, and I am tired, and the telling of it costs me. But I will tell you one more small thing before I rest, because it is the thing that has stayed with me longest, longer even than the fighting. In the quiet just before the skin came, when the flask was going around and the humans were being quiet in their human way, young Pim, the frightened one, the one who was scared of the dark outside, Pim was sitting against the conduit wall with his knees pulled up and his hands were shaking. I could see them shaking from across the chamber. He was terrified. He was a child, really, by their reckoning, and he was about to die in a metal room at the edge of nowhere, and he knew it, and he was terrified, and his hands would not stop shaking. And Cobb went and sat down next to him. The old chief, with all the weight of the decision on him, with the whole junction to hold, he went and sat down next to the most frightened person in the room, and he did not tell Pim to be brave. He did not tell him it would be all right. He knew it might not be all right. He just bumped Pim's shoulder with his own, and he said very quietly, "Hey, You remember that thing you owe me, the tiles. And Pim, through chattering teeth, said, I don't owe you anything, you cheat. You owe me 11 credits. You cheat at tiles. I want my 11 credits, Pim, so you don't get to die today. You die today, I'm out 11 credits. I can't allow it. It's a matter of principle. And Pim laughed. The most frightened person in the room laughed, a small broken laugh, but a real one, and his hand stopped shaking quite so hard, and he said, Fine, fine. I'll pay you your stupid 11 credits. After. After, Cobb agreed. And that was how the humans went to war. Not with speeches, not with prayers, with 11 credits and a debt that had to be paid after, because if there was an after that one of them owed the other, then there had to be an after, and so they would simply have to make one. I did not understand it then. I understand it now. They were not insane. They were the sanest creatures I have ever known, about the only thing that has ever truly mattered. And they had simply decided, all of them, long ago and all the way down, that being alive was not the same as not dying. The skin hit the door. I will tell you what happened when we held it in the next part. I have to gather myself first. But I will tell you this much, so you do not worry through the waiting. The array never came back online. Not that day, not ever. And it was the 6 insane humans, and one frightened HFY signals officer who finally understood what the humans had been trying to teach him all along, who made sure of it. I told you the skin hit the door. I am going to tell you now what holding that door was like, and I am going to try to tell it true, even the parts that do not make me look well, because a testimony that flatters the one giving it is worth nothing. The first thing I learned about a fight is that it is not like the drills. In the drills there is an order to things. There is a beginning and a middle and an end, and a voice that tells you when each one starts. A real fight has none of that. A real fight is just noise and light and the smell of scorched metal, all at once with no warning and no shape, and your body trying to do 6 things while your mind is still 3 seconds behind, asking what just happened. When the skin came through the gap in the door, I did not see it as a tactic. I saw it as a wall of dry, clicking limbs and dark, plated bodies pouring into the red light, and I heard a high keening sound that I realized much later was their war cry. And I felt my own legs trying to carry me backward into the dead-end wall, where there was nowhere to go, exactly as Cobb had planned. And then I saw how the humans fought, and I forgot to be afraid, because I had never seen anything like it. Understand, the HFY fight by doctrine, so do the Othran, so I would have told you that morning does every civilized species. You hold a formation, you cover assigned arcs, you fall back through prepared positions in good order. You preserve the line because the line is the thing, and an individual who breaks the line to do something clever is a fool who gets the formation killed. We are taught this from the creche. The line is everything. The unit survives. The unit matters. The self is a part of the unit and not more than the unit. The humans did not have a line. Or rather, they did, but it was a living thing, and it moved. And it changed shape from one breath to the next, and no 2 of them did the same thing twice, and there was no doctrine in it that I could find anywhere, and somehow it worked better than any formation I had ever drilled. Cobb held the center of the gap with the heavy cutting tool, and he did not move quickly, but he was never quite where the skin expected him to be, and the tool came around in slow, heavy arcs that ended things. Rays was everywhere at once on the left, small and fast, never still, darting in to jam something into a joint of plating and darting out before the limb could come around. Tavar simply stood on the right side of the door like a piece of the station itself and let the skin break against him, and when one got a grip on him, he took it apart with his bare hands in a way I will not describe. Doc fought one-handed with a slug thrower because her other hand never stopped working on the wounded, dragging them back, packing wounds, cursing. Pim, frightened Pim had been given the job of reloading, of running the spare slug cartridges from the cache to whoever was empty, And he did it on his hands and knees through the worst of it, weeping openly the whole time, weeping and shaking and doing it anyway, which I have come to believe is the truest courage there is. And Salvo, with one arm strapped to his chest, fought left-handed beside Ray's badly and stayed alive, mostly, because Ray spent half her attention keeping him that way. There was no order to any of it, there was no line, and yet this is the thing they were reading each other, constantly, without words mostly, and when there were words they were short and strange. Left, got it, down, switching. Tiny scraps of sound that meant nothing to me and everything to them. When Ray's was overwhelmed, Cobb was already shifting before she called for him because some part of him had been watching her without watching her. When Tavar went down under 3 at once, Doc had put 2 slugs into the pile before I even registered he had fallen. It was not a formation. It was something I did not have a word for then. I have a word for it now. It was a family fighting for its life, and a family does not need a doctrine, because a family already knows in its body in the place below thought, where every other member is and what every other member needs. They had spent 3 years drinking together and arguing over marked tiles and fixing pipes in cramped crawlways, and I had thought that was just how they passed the dead time on a dead post. It was not. It was the training. The drinking was the drill. The arguing was the drill. Every small shared thing across 3 quiet years had been knitting them into the single living thing that now held the door. I understood, watching them, that the humans had not chosen to fight as individuals because they valued the individual over the unit. It was the opposite. They fought as a swarm of individuals because each one trusted the others so completely, so far down, that none of them had to think about anything except the small piece of chaos directly in front of his own hands. The trust did the work that doctrine does for us, and trust is faster than doctrine. Trust does not have to be relayed up a chain and back down. Trust is already there in the body before the order could even be given. We had a line because we did not trust each other enough to fight without one. They needed no line, because they trusted each other more than they feared death. I did not fight in that first wave. I am not ashamed to say it. I had no weapon and no training, and I would only have died and gotten someone killed dragging me back. What I did was the only thing I could do that was useful. I made myself Pim's second pair of hands. I crawled the cache with him. I carried cartridges. I learned fast in the worst classroom there is, where the cache was and how the cartridges loaded and which of the humans shot through them quickest. And within minutes Pim and I had a rhythm, the frightened child and the frightened officer, crawling back and forth through the blood and the shell casings, keeping the others fed. And somewhere in that a strange thing happened to me. The fear did not leave, I want to be honest. The fear never left, not for a single moment of the days that followed, but it stopped being the only thing in me. It made room. Around the fear there grew a small hard knot of something else, something that said, this matters and you are useful, and the people you are keeping alive would do the same for you. And that knot was enough to crawl on. That knot was enough. I think that knot is what the humans live inside of all the time. I think it is what look alive means. The first wave broke against us and pulled back into the dark of the corridor, dragging its dead, and the chamber went suddenly, ringingly quiet, and I lay against the conduit wall next to Pim with my chest heaving, and I realized we had held. We had held the door. Cobb was on one knee in the center of the gap, breathing hard, the cutting tool hanging from his hand. There was skin blood on him to the elbow. He looked back over his shoulder at all of us, at the bloodied, gasping, impossible little band that had just done a thing the doctrine said could not be done, and he did the human thing. He grinned. "Anybody dead?" he said. "Not yet," said Doc, working on Tavar's leg. "Then we're winning," said Cobb, and he sat down in the gap with his back against the half-shut door, in the spot where he would feel them coming through the metal before he heard them, and he closed his eyes, and he rested, because a sane creature rests when it can, and the humans, I was learning, were not insane at all. They were just sane about a different thing. Here is what the long hours were like, because the waves were not the hard part. The waves were almost a relief. The waves were simple. You did your small job and you survived it, or you did not. The hard part was the time between the waves, the long stretching hours of dark and quiet and dread, when there was nothing to do but wait for the dry clicking to start again and think. The skin were not foolish. After the first wave failed, they stopped throwing themselves at the door. They settled in to do it the patient way, the way that any reasonable commander does it. They probed, and they waited, and they let the dread do their work for them. A rush every few hours, just enough to keep us from sleeping. A constant pressure of clicking in the dark, advancing and withdrawing, so that we could never quite tell if the next wave was real or a feint. They were trying to wear us down. They were trying to make the cost of holding feel larger than the cost of giving up. It is sound tactics. It is what I would have done. It works on reasonable people. I watched it not work on the humans, and that was the second great lesson. In the long dark between waves, the humans did not let the dread settle. They would not allow it. They fought it the way they fought everything, by refusing to be small, by insisting on being more alive than the situation wanted them to be. They talked. They told stories. Cobb told a long, rambling tale about a machine he had once fixed on a colony world, a tale with no point and no ending that he stretched out across an entire hour purely, I realized, to fill the silence with a human voice. Ray's taught me their tile game properly, with a set she had somehow had in her pocket the whole time, and let me win once, badly, and the others jeered at her for going easy on me. Salvo, drifting in and out on whatever Doc had given him for the pain, kept up a slurred running commentary on everything, most of it filthy, all of it funny, and when he faded out Doc would jostle him awake and demand he finish the joke, not because she cared about the joke but because she was watching his eyes, watching for the slide that meant the wound had gone bad. They were keeping each other alive with words. Every joke was a check. Every story was a hand on a shoulder. I came to see that the constant human noise, which I had always found tiring, which the Kasara consider a kind of weakness, the inability to simply be quiet, was a survival mechanism so deep they did not even know they were doing it. As long as a human is talking, a human is not drowning. As long as there is a joke being told, there is an after to tell it in. Pym paid Cobb his 11 credits, by the way, in the second long dark. He counted them out solemnly, real physical credit chits, into Cobb's grease-stained palm, and Cobb counted them just as solemnly and pronounced the debt settled, and they shook hands on it. And I understood that this was the most serious thing that had happened all day. They had made an after. They had reached into the future and built a small certain thing there, a debt, paid, and now the future existed, because a thing had been completed in it. And a future that exists is a future you can fight your way toward. The reasonable people would have spent that hour calculating odds and despairing. The humans spent it settling a debt of 11 credits, and were stronger for it than all our calculations. I have to tell you about the others now, the other survivors, because I have made it sound as though it was only the 6 humans and me at the junction, and that is not quite true, and the truth matters. When Cobb walked out of the maintenance bay, 6 humans and 1 foolish Kasara went with him. But over the first hours, as word filtered through the lower ring of what was happening at the junction, that it was holding, that the array was still dark, that the insane ones were somehow not yet dead, others came. Not many. 2 of the Othran crept down to join us, their throats the dark, uncertain gray of people who have changed their minds and are frightened of it. One of the dull engineers came alone, and turned out to know more about the conduits than any of us, and made himself invaluable. And young Ren, the Kasara who had called fighting insane, who had argued loudest for surrender, Ren came last, and would not meet my eye, and took a place beside me at the cartridge cache and worked without a word, and I never asked him what had changed his mind, because I did not need to. I knew. He had sat in the safe room and discovered the same thing I had discovered, that there are things worse than dying, and that being the kind of person who lets the door fall is one of them. So by the second day we were 11 at the junction. 6 humans, 2 Othran, 1 Dull, 2 Kassarai. And the others, the 8 who had not come. The 8 reasonable ones who had stayed with Threll and accepted her command and chosen, sanely, correctly, to surrender. The skin took them. We did not know at first. We only knew that Threll's group had gone quiet, that the lower habitation ring had fallen silent. We hoped it meant they had been moved, contained, made prisoner as Threll had predicted. We told ourselves the convention had held, that the skin had taken their surrender and their lives in exchange. We found out the truth on the third day, when the skin commander spoke to us for the first time. It came over the junction's internal channel, which the skin had patched into from the command arc. A voice, translated flat and toneless by the station systems, with the dry clicking of the skin language running underneath the words like an undertow. It said it was speaking to the human called Cobb. It knew his name. It knew all our names, I realized. It had the station's manifest. It had everything. It had been watching us hold the junction for 2 days, and it had finally decided to do the reasonable thing, the thing I would have done, the thing any sane commander does when a frontal assault is too costly. It found our weakness, and it pressed on it. It told us that it held 8 conquered crew prisoners taken in good order under their own surrender. It named them. It named Threll of the Quiet Tide. It named the others. And it told us, in that flat, toneless, translated voice, that for every hour we continued to deny it the conduits, it would kill one of them, beginning with the senior officer, and that this was not cruelty but arithmetic, and that we, being reasonable creatures, would understand the arithmetic, and would lay down our tools and come out, and save 8 lives in exchange for a station that did not, after all, matter. It was a good move. I want to be clear about that. It was the correct move. It was the move that breaks reasonable people, and it nearly broke us, the Othran and the Dull and the Kassarai of us, because the arithmetic was sound. 8 lives, real lives, named lives against a thing, a power conduit, an array, a number, a faceless mass of people light years away who would never know our names. The arithmetic said, "Come out." The arithmetic said, "You have done enough, you are not monsters. No one could ask you to let 8 named friends die for an abstraction." I felt myself folding. I felt the reasonable Kassarai in me, the one who had asked for the quiet posting, beginning to stand up and walk toward the door. And Holly's Cobb sat very still, with his eyes closed, and listened to the whole thing, the entire flat, toneless, terrible arithmetic of it. And when it was done, he opened his eyes, and he keyed the channel, and he spoke. And I have never in my life heard a voice that was at once so gentle and so utterly, finally immovable. "I hear you." Cobb said, "I want you to know I hear you. I'm not pretending I didn't. You've got 8 people, good people, people I drank with, and you're gonna start killing them in an hour if I don't come out." He paused. He looked around at all of us, at the Othran whose throats had gone white with anguish, at the dull engineer who had stopped working, at Wren, at me, at his own 5, who were watching him with a terrible steadiness, because they already knew, I think, what he was going to say. "And the answer's no," Cobb said. The channel was silent. The skin commander had not expected that. You could feel it in the silence. The arithmetic did not have a slot for no. "You're gonna ask me why," Cobb went on, "so I'll save you the trouble. You think I'm doing math. You think I'm sitting here weighing 8 against the number on the other side of that array, and you think if you make the 8 real enough, name 'em, put faces on 'em, you can make the 8 feel bigger than the number and I'll break. That's a good plan. That works on most folks. It nearly worked on these folks right here, the reasonable ones, and I don't blame 'em a bit." He paused. "But here's the thing you don't understand about us, and I'm gonna tell you for free, because it's gonna cost you, and I want you to have time to think about it. We don't do the math. You hear me? There's no math. The second I let you put a price on people 8 here, A million there, my crew, your crew, doesn't matter. The second I pick up that pencil and start doing the sum, you've already won because now it's just a number and you can always make me a worse number than the one I've got. That's the trap. The math is the trap, so we don't do it. We never did. We decided a long, long time ago as a species that some things you just don't trade, and you don't trade them for any price. Not 8 lives and not 8 million, because the trading is the thing that kills you. Not the dying, the trading. You're gonna kill those 8 people, I know that now. I can't stop you, and I'm not gonna get them killed faster by lying to myself about it. So I'm gonna grieve them. Everyone. I knew Threll. She was better than me, and she was scared, and she did the smart thing, and you're gonna murder her for it, and I will carry that the rest of whatever life I've got left, which I'll grant you is probably about a day. But you are not getting this array. You came here to start a war with a free first move. You wanted our ears so you could murder a couple million people who'd never see it coming, quiet, like you murdered our watch this morning. And 6 grease monkeys and a couple of folks who changed their minds are gonna sit in this dead-end room and die before we let you have it. And there is not one single thing you can put on the scale that's gonna change that, because we threw the scale away. You can't bargain with people who threw the scale away. I'm sorry. I truly am. It'd be easier for both of us. And then Cobb said the last thing, very quietly, almost kindly. And it is the thing the skin commander never answered, and it is the thing I have carried longest of all. You think we're insane, Cobb said. I can hear it in how you keep doing the math at us, over and over, like the right number's finally gonna make us blink. We're not insane. We just love something more than we're scared of dying, and you've never met anybody like that, so you don't have a move for it. And that's not our problem, friend. That's yours. He cut the channel,